And we are so pleased to welcome Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. I'm so glad we're finally able to do this.
Me too. Thank you for having me on.
We've been talking about this, it seems like for a couple of years here, going back to Mackinac and even before, and the schedule's never quite worked out. So thank you again for taking time to talk with us.
I'm really pleased to be speaking with you, and there's so much to talk about when it comes to transportation and Michigan.
There we go. Let's dive right in here, and let's start with one thing that everybody's watching, and that is the airline industry, particularly safety. Starting with Boeing, it began earlier with the Alaska Air Boeing 737, where the door plunge came off, and 16,000 feet, and all the things going on here, and other safety issues with Boeing aircraft that's been going on here. So my question is, what are you doing as a department to examine the safety of the aircraft involved right now?
So effectively, FAA has put Boeing under a microscope to make sure that the quality of the aircraft they put out conform to the standards that we have set. They're a manufacturer and they have a responsibility to make sure that their product meets those agreed on safety standards. That's critically important to the safety record of U.S. aviation, which is extraordinary. Now, the fact that flying in the U.S. on an airline is the safest form of transportation in the world is not something that just happened on its own. It's something we have to actively and vigilantly maintain. The FAA administrator gave Boeing 90 days to come up with a comprehensive plan for how to improve these quality issues. They have now reached that 90-day mark, put forward their plan, and FAA will be monitoring to make sure that they conform to it. Now, that's going to include more on-the-ground, in-person inspections, attention at the senior level, but also at the shop floor to make sure everything from the corporate culture to the procedures on the ground down to every line worker are the way they need to be to keep U.S. aviation at that extraordinary safety standard that we've worked so hard over the years and over the decades to establish in the United States.
Global warming and extreme temperatures are not topics typically the U.S. Transportation Secretary is talking about, but it is something that you are bringing up now, and it's affecting things like turbulence. And how concerned are you, given we're talking about having an incredibly hot summer this year?
Well, we are seeing all of our transportations in this, our transportation systems in this country be more and more impacted by what's going on with our climate. Whether it is a situation that happened in the Pacific Northwest where transit systems had to shut down because they had a heat wave that shouldn't even be statistically possible, and the cables of that transit system were at risk of melting, all the way through to issues like scientists believing that we're seeing more turbulence in the air. Now, that means we've got to work to make our infrastructure more resilient. We are funding projects to make sure our highways and roads and bridges and more are better equipped to deal with this extreme weather that we're seeing more and more of. We're also working to try to prevent it from getting any worse. If you look at the economy, the transportation sector emits the most carbon pollution of any part of the U.S. economy, but we can also be a huge part of the solution and create good paying jobs as we do it. And we're especially excited about how things like the rise of U.S.-made, often union-made electric vehicles can be one example of how we can create American jobs while doing the right thing for the long term when it comes to climate and pollution.
Lost in a lot of the political divisiveness is something that your department didn't get enough credit for, was negotiating with the airlines things like junk fees paid by travelers, which is upwards of, what, $500 million a year? Talk about that.
Yeah, this is part of the broader focus in this administration of tackling the cost of living and lowering costs. And some of those costs are in the form of what those charges you get from airlines. One thing that's especially frustrating is you see an ad about a great airfare, you go to book it, and suddenly all these fees pop up that are technically not part of the airfare, but you have to pay them. Change fees, cancel fees, baggage fees, Wi-Fi fees, airport fees that you can't even figure out what they are when you look at them on a ticket. So we are requiring the airlines to put information about these fees up front, and we're requiring them to give you your money back if you pay a fee for something like baggage or Wi-Fi and don't get the service that you paid for. We're also requiring automatic refunds for passengers whose flights get canceled or significantly delayed. It's all about making sure that passengers have a better experience, holding airlines to a higher standard. And if you're planning a trip, as so many people are this summer, would encourage you to go to our website called flightrights.gov. You can get more information all the way down to airline by airline information about what you can expect and what is required when it comes to taking care of you, and everything from refunds to what happens if you get stuck at an airport because of a mechanical issue.
We're going to take a little break here and come back and talk a little bit more about airlines and also ports and bridges and things here in Michigan. So keep it right here. We're back with more Michigan Matters right after this. Michigan Matters. We're talking with U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg about travel, safety, and other issues. The bipartisan infrastructure bill, which your department announced $40 billion funding bridge repairs and transportation infrastructure repairs. And tell us a little bit about it and how it impacts Michigan.
Yeah, this is one of President Biden's biggest priorities when he came in. We spent most of our first year negotiating this bill, getting it through Congress, getting bipartisan support, and now we are getting those dollars out to communities across the country and across Michigan to fix the things that have needed to be fixed for a long time. Governor Whitmer had already prioritized infrastructure, but no state can do this on their own. There need to be those federal dollars, and that's what we're doing. Major airport upgrades, just announced another $60 million going to the airport in Detroit. We've also got grants going to places like Berry County and their airport and everything in between. Similar on the road and bridge and highway projects. Some of these are more than $100 million for major projects that will take years to complete, but are already creating good paying jobs. Others are streetscape projects, planning projects. We got a whole set of funds going to make communities safer everywhere from Genesee County to St. Joe County to up north. We're doing a big project in Dearborn to help make it safer there for pedestrians. Just every form of transportation you can think of is seeing more funding, more improvements, thanks to President Biden's infrastructure package.
So you guys deserve some kudos and credits for the Baltimore port reopening 100 days of Herculean effort after it was hit by the ship. And you are coordinating with something like 56 agencies and getting this thing back and going. And what was that like?
That's right. It was a horrific day when we woke up to the news, or in my case was woken up in the middle of the night with the news that a ship had struck the Francis Scott Key Bridge, a very important bridge in Baltimore, and it fell into the Patapsco River. It blocked the channel, which meant the port of Baltimore was shut down. We're talking about the #1 vehicle handling port in the United States. They had to take more than 50,000 tons of wreckage out of that channel in order to get the port fully back up and running. As you mentioned, dozens of agencies were involved: the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Coast Guard, our department, of course, working closely with Governor Wes Moore of Maryland and his team, local agencies. And while what happened that day was terrible, what happened next was inspiring. That is the teamwork that made it possible to get that wreckage cleared, get that port back up and running, get those workers back on the job in less than 100 days. Now our focus is shifting to the other major piece of the response and recovery, which is to build a new bridge to replace the one that was destroyed. It's going to be a different design. The old bridge was built in the 1970s. It's going to take a while to get it done. We can't get this done in 100 days, but we are working to do it as quickly and as safely as possible.
Speaking of closer to home here, the Gordie Howe Bridge, which is going to be connecting Detroit and Canada, which has been in process here, it builds upon the tunnel and also the Ambassador Bridge. There's so much trade going on between the two countries here. Any information update on that, when it's going to be completed and timeline?
We're excited for that to continue. The project sponsors themselves have the latest in terms of the timeline. What I can say is that this is a very important international link. The border at Detroit and Windsor and the connections between Canada and Michigan and thereby the United States are vital to our economy, and they're especially important, of course, for Michiganders. It's why I regularly engage with my Canadian counterpart, the Minister for Transportation on the Canadian side, and we're working to make sure that all forms of connection are strong and getting stronger.
We talked with Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm earlier about electric vehicles. I know you have talked much about that as well. Do you still, given the fact there's some retrenchment going on by the manufacturers, people backpedaling a little bit on it, sticking with hybrids a little bit more here, are you still confident that EVs are the future?
It's very clear that EVs are going to be the future. What we need to make sure of is that is a made in America EV future. And it's not going to happen overnight. We never thought it would, but what we are seeing is every single year more Americans are buying EVs. And that means we need to have the charging infrastructure to keep up. Look, many Americans are able to charge at home. That's what we usually do. We got to plug in a minivan that we plug in the garage at our house in Traverse City, but not everybody's in a house with a garage. And on those longer trips, you need to know that you're going to be able to find a charger when you need one. So we're building out a charging network, and we're working to make sure we build up that U.S. industry.
Real quickly here, we're almost out of time. I know you moved to Traverse City with your husband and your twins, who I think are 3 years old now. Are you getting a chance to enjoy the pure Michigan summers, or are you too busy traveling on the road right now?
You know, I'm not home as much as I like, but I love my new home. We're there because that's where Chasten grew up, and it means that the kids can be close to their grandparents, which has been wonderful and very helpful, as so many parents know, in terms of just that helping hand. But it is an amazing and beautiful part of the country, one with its own, by the way, unique infrastructure needs as well that I've gotten to know. And boy, whenever we can manage, I love being able to be home and enjoy these Michigan summers.
That'll be the last word. Secretary Buttigieg, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. We'll look forward to seeing you maybe in studio next time.
I'd love it. Thanks very much.
And thank you at home for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you next Sunday for more Michigan Matters.